Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
It is Love-Hate Day, by the way, and we have a lot to go through before we get to Thursday Night Football, so let's kick things off with the running backs, and a running back that we are loving right now is Achane because his quarterback in Tua has been back, and that's helped. Let's hear from Achane on the connection with Tua and his return.
He is the perfect guy to be in the QB of this offense. Like you said, you have to know so much when it comes to this offense because we got a lot of motions, and you got to know a lot of things. Like, it's not easy for somebody just come in and be like, okay, I can do this, because it's not the type of offense he run. But Tua, he comes into this offense, he brings a lot of confidence. He makes sure he makes our job easy. He makes sure we lined up right, and if you happen to forget what you got, Tua's able to make sure that he puts you in the right spot.
Love-hate running backs. Achane averaging 21 touches in the 4 games Tua has started, Matthew. He has been a true RB1 and a workhorse when Tua's under center.
Yeah, because those touches have translated into fantasy production. You mentioned the 21 touches under Tua. He's averaging 27.8 fantasy points per game. I mean, almost 30 a game for the former Texas A&M Aggie. We love Achane. We love him against the Rams defense, by the way. They allow the 3rd most yards per reception to running backs. And one of the reasons I mention that is because Achane has been so involved in the passing game since Tua came back, especially. Those 4 games that you mentioned that Tua Tagovailoa started, he has a 22% target share. He has at least 6 receptions in all 4 of those games. So given how bad the Rams are defensively, especially against pass-catching running backs, wheels up for Achane. He's my running back 3 this week.
Yeah, and over the past 3 games that Tua has actually played, we talk about the issues with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill to a lesser extent. Achane is the number 1 guy in the passing offense, as well as the number 1 guy in the rushing offense. So Achane, I think coming into the season, there was the idea that his ceiling was as high as anyone. There were worlds coming into the year where Achane could be RB1 or just the number 1 overall player in fantasy, and he's kind of playing at that type of level when Tua is there.
A slow start to the season, Jay, for DeAndre Swift, but he's got 5 straight games with 18-plus touches right now. He's averaging over 21 touches a game since Week 4, and he's got a Patriots defense on deck that's not exactly invincible.
Yeah, it's not terrifying. It's not terrible, but I think the main thing with him is just game script. The fact that they're 6-point favorites and he just has this incredibly high floor in terms of workload. I think also there was an idea perhaps after the London game for Caleb Williams, maybe this is going to be a high-flying, explosive passing offense. Not so much. So I think that just with their commitment to running the ball, with the work that Swift is getting, relatively unopposed in that backfield for now, he's a locked-in starter.
Yeah, and it's a nice matchup here, right? I mean, 3 of the last 4 running backs that have faced New England has had at least 115 total yards. Past month, Patriots allow the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. And so DeAndre Swift is just getting, as you see it there on your screen, just a massive workload. Since Week 4, he's got the 4th most touches per game among all running backs in the NFL. He's been, you see the headline there, he's been a ball hog. He's been a true bell cow running back. Honestly, Chicago uses him more than NBC uses me, and that's saying something. DeAndre Swift is a top 10 fantasy running back for me in Week 10.
James Conner sneaks into the top 15 here. He's got the Jets, Matthew, who have allowed 16-plus points to a running back in 4 straight games. The idea against the Jets defense is simple. Run the ball a lot. Arizona wants to do that.
Yeah,
what do you got for me?
Why can't your Jets ever stop the run? Why haven't they committed to it? How many coaches do they have to go through before they figure out they should probably try to stop the run?
Need better players.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, need better players.
This is Joe Douglas's fault?
It absolutely is.
Should the Jets be favored in Arizona? Because they are at the moment.
I would call it pick.
Yeah, that's fair. I think they're the same level of team.
Yeah.
They get to being the same level of team by completely different methods, but I think overall they are the same level of team.
There's going to be a lot of points in this game.
Let me tell you, Connor, I think you're going to be 8-8 going into the last week of the season to win and make the playoffs, and then you'll either lose that game in heartbreaking fashion, or you'll win that game and then lose by 30 points to Baltimore in round 1.
That's Jets will be 8-9. I've never been sure of something in my life. Yes. Turns out losing to the Patriots matters.
It turns out it certainly does. It'll be interesting to see how they do against Arizona. But certainly, James Conner, as we talk about bell cow running backs, he's had 8 completed games this season. He's had at least 19 touches in 7 of them. You mentioned the Jets defense as well. The last 4 running backs to face the Jets saw at least 20 touches, and they've given up at least 16 points, as you mentioned, to running backs in 4 straight. So James Conner getting a massive workload and a great matchup. He's a top 13 running back for me this week.
Some others receiving votes here. Your man Najee Harris, Jay, who's had a great season so far. Kareem Hunt, who's been a workhorse for the Chiefs backfield off the couch and getting a ton of touches. Tyrone Tracy, who's been a breakout player for that Giants offense, and Tyler Allgeier, who, listen, no matter what Bijan Robinson does, he just doesn't go away.
He doesn't go away. He's been going a little bit more away lately, though. I know that he got into the end zone against Dallas, but he only had the 6 carries. He went 12 for 33 the week before that. Only 5 carries against the Seahawks, so they were getting blown out by the end of that one. Najee Harris, unsurprisingly, perhaps is the most interesting one to me. Just as Jaylen Warren kind of gets more involved in this offense and comes off that injury that delayed his start to the season, I just wonder whether that's going to shift more to being 50-50 or the Najee Harris, who has been in the best form of his career against the Commanders' run defense. The Commanders' defense has improved, still not terrifying. I do think that the loss of Jonathan Allen is perhaps being offset by Johnny Newton just emerging on the interior of that defensive line. So, look, the Steelers are 3-point underdogs in this one, Matthew, to your Commanders.
Which is crazy, but Najee's getting a ton of work, right? In the 2 games that Russell Wilson started, he's averaging over 21 touches a game. And so, just workload, I think, gets him there to be a top 20 running back, always a threat to fall into the end zone. I don't know, Isaiah Pacheco is going to come back sooner rather than later, but not this week and not against Denver, where Kareem Hunt over those last 4 is averaging over 25 touches a game. Broncos 7th most fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs, so it's a nice matchup for Hunt. He's a top 20 play for me this week. We mentioned Tyrone Tracy. He's playing Carolina. He's getting a ton of work, and he's playing Carolina. Top 20 play for me. And finally, Tyler Allgeier. We're stuck with Tyler Allgeier. It is what it is. But the New Orleans Saints, despite firing Dennis Allen, I don't think it's going to stop the fact that they can't stop the run. They're very Jets-like in that fashion. Last month, Saints allow 127 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. They also give up 5.5 yards per carry to opposing running backs. That's most in the NFL. So Tyler Allgeier, who's, getting, even though Bijan Robinson is getting his, they still see Tyler Allgeier finds his way into double-digit touches every week, it seems like.
Yep, no, I agree there. And Tyrone Tracy, he's a 6.5-point favorite. This is the only time all season that the New York Giants are going to be 6.5-point favorites. Kind of like the Panthers plus 6.5. I don't think the Giants should be almost touchdown favorites over any team in the NFL, but in theory, Tracy should have game script on his side.
Yeah, Giants dealing with a lot of injuries going into that game. I know Carolina's dealt with a lot of injuries.
Bryce Young also, I get that it's Bryce Young. He still has variance. He still has upside, and he's coming off probably, I think, the best game of his career.
Not probably. Definitely the best game of his career. But, just from a looks, I think probably, statistically, but definitely from just a pure.
Yeah, he looked way more comfortable.
The throws he was able to make in that game.
He looked like, okay, that's Bryce Young. Okay, that's the kid we saw at Alabama. Not consistently, not for the whole game, but there were moments there where you said, okay, not all hope is lost here.
Yep, using the middle of the field in a way that he probably hasn't before. And this Giants defense is good, but if they can contain Dexter Lawrence, then I think the secondary is somewhat exploitable.
All right, let's take a look at the hate list headline by Rhamondre Stevenson. Matthew, he gets a lot of touches, but he's averaging 2.2 yards per carry over his last 3 games. He's a touchdown-dependent running back right now.
That's correct, completely correct, Connor. In the 3 games this year in which he has not scored a touchdown, he's averaging 4.3 fantasy points per game. He is so touchdown-dependent. It is incredibly inefficient. As you mentioned, the 2.2 yards per carry, right? Well, so he needs to be in at least positive game script or at least neutral game script so that he can continue to, get into the end zone or have a chance here. Patriots have the 2nd lowest implied team total this week as well, on the road at Chicago. Bears, pretty good defense. They're actually not as good against the run recently as they had been earlier in the season, but still just doesn't feel like, again, it's a little bit of how lucky do you feel? If you think Stevenson gets in the end zone, then okay. But just he has a chance to crater your week if he does not score.
Rico Dowdle right behind him. Stevenson RB24, Dowdle RB26. The Eagles over the last 4 weeks, Jay, are allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. I don't know how much better things are going to get with Cooper Rush under center for Dallas.
Yeah, in theory, just a lot less space, a lot less attention that needs to be paid to the passing game with the much maligned Dak Prescott not being able to suit up, but Dak Prescott's still a massive upgrade over Cooper Rush. Rico Dowdle goes up against the Philly run defense that quietly has turned into a real strength of the team. They're 3rd in the NFL in terms of rush success rate, so really strong there. I think this Eagles defense overall is just a much better unit than it was last year, where it just became a catastrophe. I think putting in Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean is really really helped the back end there. I think that's just made the whole defense a lot more solid, and you wouldn't expect that Rico Dowdle is going to be in positive game script. At the same time, his path to value and to flex-worthy play is just being a PPR merchant when they're down, I think.
Right, he's gotten a decent amount of targets in the passing game, and Cooper Rush might be more prone to dump off than Dak Prescott was. So I have him in the flex range. I'm at running back 26, but given he had such a nice game last week, I think people might think like, oh, well, maybe there's more opportunity here for Rico Dowdle this week. But Ezekiel Elliott, Jerry Jones saying on the radio that he expects Ezekiel Elliott to play this week as well. So he's going to take a handful of touches away from Rico Dowdle. And Connor, you mentioned when you introduced him that over the last 4 weeks, the Eagles allow the fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. Well, in that same stretch, every single running back that has faced Philadelphia has had under 12 fantasy points. So you're right. Like the way that Dowdle gets to, other than falling into the end zone, the way that Dowdle gets to being usable this week is like Alvin Kamara-esque, like just a bunch of dump-offs, but I don't know that
exactly what happened last week. Just a replica of last week. They're down the whole game, and it's not really competitive, but he still ends up with 5 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. Now, he's still not going to go 12 for 75 on the ground again, but the PPR work is what you want.
The PPR work, but, I think it was his 3rd receiving touchdown of the year, which is, so it's like that's within the range of outcomes, but I don't know that you feel like, well, he's definitely getting into the end zone in this one as well. And I actually don't think the Cowboys get blown out here.
No, I think it'll be somewhat competitive. Micah Parsons expected back, still going to have CD Lamb.
Eagles are really banged up on offense.
Yeah, I think this could be close-ish. A one score, a 7-point type of win, which is what the line is.
So I don't think, and I also think they'll be more methodical under Cooper Rush. I don't think they're going to be suddenly in like hurry up, type offense. They're going to be more methodical, I think.
It feels like for Rico Dowdle, like a 13 carries for 40 yards and 3 catches for 22 yards and no touchdowns, that type of game, which is okay, but not what you want.
Running back 26.
Travis Etienne, our final running back on the list here, RB 33. I mean, Jay, he's got a 31% snap rate in his return last week. He had 5 touches. I know the rest of this backfield's had, a little banged up on the early injury reports, but Etienne, it's just not happening for this team.
I just cut him from the League of Arsenal. I just don't want him on my team. There's no one real better
out
there.
Him.
But just like spiritually, I want him out. It just doesn't feel like he has a role on this team. Feels like he's constantly banged up. Feels like Tank Bigsby is the guy. Feels like they're constantly going to be down because the team is selling parts and is banged up and just isn't good. So I just don't know, like, in what world, in like a 12-team league, when are you going to be starting Travis Etienne?
No, you need like at least. I think the world in which you start Travis Etienne is a world in which Tank Bigsby isn't playing. Like, if he gets hurt.
Yeah, so he's like Isaac Garendo then.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, he's played 5 games this year with Tank Bigsby active, and in those games, he's averaging 8.1 fantasy points per game. Like, this is a true running back by committee. You don't love the matchup against Minnesota. There's been 3 running backs, literally only 3 running backs all season long that have scored over 12 fantasy points against the Minnesota Vikings this year. And every single one of those running backs saw at least 19 touches. And I just don't know that the volume is going to be there for Travis Etienne because they do like Tank Bigsby. They do want to get him involved. And by the way, Dearness Johnson has carved out a small role in this offense as well. And so not that you're worried about Dearness Johnson's 5 touches, but like those are 5 touches that aren't going to Travis Etienne, whatever. So, I mean, there's one game this year. Week 2 of the NFL season, Travis Etienne had 16 touches in week 2. That's the only game this year where he's had more than 15. So I'm just saying, like, it doesn't seem like he's going to get the volume against this Vikings defense that's been a top 12 run defense over the last month.
We move over to pass catchers here, and we start with Garrett Wilson, who's coming off a week where he had the catch of the year. People are wondering, though, is it the catch of the last 10 years? Garrett Wilson was asked this week on if his catch was better than OBJ's. Take a listen.
Man, Odell's, it was different, and he got 2 feet down. The ball was finna land out of bounds. And it was Odell, man. It was Odell against the Cowboys. Like, that was the one. So for it to even come up in that convo, I'm blessed. I'm honored. But yeah, man, Odell got that's that boy.
But Garrett, you lost that game.
You know what? All right. Fair enough.
Love-hate pass catchers. Garrett Wilson. Matthew, it's been interesting. It feels like when the Jets traded for Davante Adams, some people had some fear it would hurt Garrett Wilson, but it's been the exact opposite. He's been phenomenal now.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's opened up the field, and suddenly when you're a defensive coordinator facing the Jets, it's a little bit of pick your poison, right? And so, I mean, I know Alan Lazard wasn't there last week, but there was times out there when you had all 3 guys, and so you're trying to figure out where am I Where am I trying to focus my defensive attention?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
and he's not
Rodgers
going to be there for the next couple weeks, Alan Lazard. So this
is true, but it's like, but you still have 2 elite wide receivers that can run pretty much every route, and has a quarterback that is as good as anyone in the NFL at immediately reading a defense and changing a play at the line of scrimmage and going where the coverage isn't, finding the open guy. You know, there's a lot that you can criticize Aaron Rodgers about, but that ain't one of them. And so Garrett Wilson now has had back-to-back games with a 30% target share, at least 6 targets in every game, all 3, since Davante Adams came over from the Raiders. And every wide receiver that's seen at least a 30% target share, that's why I brought up that number, against the Cardinals this year has scored at least 18 fantasy points. Cardinals also allow the 5th highest catch rate to opposing wide receivers, so maybe Garrett Wilson isn't going to need to only do it with one hand. He can do it, comfortably with 2 hands. But Davante Adams opening up the defense, and also honestly, like, the Jets getting into more game script. Like, the Jets were expected to be this elite defensive unit, and they're not. No. They have a good secondary, but like, you can move the ball on the Jets. You can certainly run on the Jets, and so as a result, they've had to be in more negative game script than I think people thought coming into the year.
Yep. You know what catch never gets mentioned in this OBJ, Garrett Wilson discussion? The best catch I've ever seen in my life was Julio Jones in the Super Bowl. And no one brings that up because they lost the game.
Right.
But that doesn't change how good the catch was. And when everyone was watching that, everyone's breath was taken away. And it was in the Super Bowl. And just the stakes different. Anyway, Julio Jones aside. Also, Santonio Holmes made an insane catch to win the Super Bowl too. That doesn't get brought up in the same discussion.
He didn't. Either. By the way, I go back and look at the, if you want to just go down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole, go down and look at pictures of that Santonio Holmes catch, because I think there's an argument that he did not get both feet down, that one foot was on top of the other foot, that like he actually technically got 1 foot down, and that shouldn't have been a touchdown. Okay. Because seriously, go back and you know what I'm talking about. Like go back and look at, like, if you look, people like Zapruder film, they've looked at zoomed in on it. It looks like 1 foot's on top of the other. It was an insane catch. There's no question about it. Listen, you can go through catches all the time. Just even the Super Bowl, that same game, the Julio Jones one. How about Edelman?
I was going to say
the
that's
Edelman
what's
catch
nuts
is
about it.
the Edelman catch is ridiculous.
Also, never gets brought up, but a horrific decision from Matt Ryan to throw that ball. You got the lead in the Super Bowl.
Nobody cares.
Should have been picked.
And I mean, listen, obviously David Tyree is the one that gets brought up all the time as well. But and I want to say, why am I blanking on the name of the? But as soon as I say the name of the, no one. Here's another sketch that's unbelievable that no one ever talks about in the Super Bowl. Seattle, right?
What's his name?
Was it Jermaine? No, it was Jermaine. It's like
Jermaine Kearse.
Jermaine Kearse. Jermaine Kearse. Like
that was kind of fluky though. I was thinking of the other.
But he comes down with. My point is, no one talks about it because the whole Marshawn Lynch and they don't, and Russ throws the pick. But like,
you got to win the game unless you're OBJ.
Unless you're OBJ. But my point is like that was an unbelievable catch down the sideline. A little bit fluky, but whatever. Like the catch I remember, it's not on the level of this, but just the catch that I remember do you remember this? You might be too young, but Antonio Freeman on Monday night against the Vikings, where it was on his back and he rolls over and catches it.
I've seen it, yes.
That's before I was born. I'm 19, I'm 2 years old, younger than Connor.
One of the first things I used to do at ESPN is I did a fantasy football show, my very first year, and we did some specials, and we had Antonio Freeman on the show, and so I got to know Free. Everyone calls him Free. No, that's his nickname. If you meet him, he calls him Free. And I remember asking about that catch. He goes, "That comes up every day in my life. He's like the 2 things that people bring up to me all the time are fantasy football and that catch." I'm like, oh, there you go. I get it. Yeah. Antonio Freeman was great back in the day. Yeah, he was a very good fantasy wide receiver. Highlights. Great for the Packers. Go Pack, go.
We continue our pass
I'm all over the place today.
No, you. On a Thursday?
By the way, while we're staying all over the place, you said the word conspiracy theories before, which made me realize that Aaron Rodgers' odds to be the president in 2028 are shorter than the Jets' odds to win the Super Bowl this year. So that's where you're at the moment. So you may have the president, but you don't have the Super Bowl.
That's actually, you know what? That's because RFK is not going to be part of the, he's going to be in the cabinet probably, right?
Yeah.
And
so Rodgers would run for actual president.
Right, yeah. He could
potentially. Who would be his VP?
Well, Rodgers could be
No.
He could, if RFK runs in 2028,
it's in play.
It's in play.
I feel better about that than the Jets winning the Super Bowl this year.
Vance will probably run as well, but I'm just saying,
Rodgers.
Yeah, Rodgers could be a VP candidate.
And the great thing is, when you're president, you don't have to run motion. You just got to set defense whenever you want.
Yes.
Oh boy. Anyway.
Well, I guess we'll go back to Deebo Samuel.
Yep.
Deebo Samuel makes the love list. He just misses the top 10 as wide receiver 11 for Matthew. The Bucs have allowed 18-plus fantasy points to a wide receiver in 4 of their past 5 games. This Todd Bowles secondary is just dreadful this year.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, no Brandon Ayuk. Unfortunately, Brandon Ayuk out for the year. And in his first game without Brandon Ayuk, 28% target share. 4 of the past 6 games, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, led by Todd Bowles, has allowed at least 18 fantasy points, right? They've allowed the 6th most yards after the catch to wide receivers this season. Why do I bring that up? Thank you for asking. Deebo Samuel, top 5 among wide receivers in yards after the catch. He's so good in that aspect. 49ers maybe, hopefully, possibly also get Christian McCaffrey back in this game, which I think will also open up the offense. No disrespect to Jordan Mason or Isaac Guerendo, who have done a nice job in his steed, but like they ain't CMC. And so just this offense is going to look different, assuming McCaffrey can go, and Deebo Samuel is going to be the focal point of what should be a very successful and productive passing game for San Fran.
Why is this Bucs pass defense so bad? Because they have Antoine Winfield. Zion McCollum is the number 1 cornerback in the league by PFF grade. It's not like Jordan White is that bad, I don't think. He was fine on the Jets, wasn't he?
He's very streaky, though.
Okay.
Like, he's feast or famine. He had 3 pick games, and then he'll have games where he's single-handedly responsible for multiple touchdowns. Winfield's been hurt a decent amount this year, but still a great player. They just don't have the corners right now. And the way they match up is very odd. The way they pick their coverages, that I think it is a talent issue. They've lost a lot of corners to free agency over the years, but here's the number 1 reason, Jay. They have no pass rush. Besides Yaya Diaby, they have no pass rush. Those guys are out there on an island. They don't stand a chance.
Yep. I guess it was encouraging that they were able to get Mahomes under pressure a little bit, but that was largely just, I think, Vita Vea playing out of his mind for a stretch. But yeah, it just doesn't seem like this team hasn't had any answers on David. They got 27 points to Spencer Rattler. Yeah. It's not great.
No, it's not great. You know what they should have done? You know what the Buccaneers should have done is they should have traded for Marshawn Lattimore, but they didn't. Because my Commanders did. Hail Commanders, hail victory. Just
we were pretty deep into the show without Commanders, to be honest with you.
Just saying Marshawn
People
Lattimore.
that played the over.
Just saying Marshawn Lattimore was out there for the taking, and a team that needed secondary help, like the Buccaneers weren't able to get him, but the Commanders were.
Our next wide receiver, Josh Downs. He's got the Bills, but more importantly...
By the way, Marshawn Lattimore, I'll pay the next fine you have. I don't care. Get into a fight. I don't care.
Wow.
Yeah, bring it on. Oh, yeah, I'll pay the next fine. I'm so in.
Those are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
For somebody that doesn't really plan on this show continuing.
You might also be having to catch that pretty quickly. He's playing George Pickens this week.
So
there's going to be a fight.
There probably is going to be a fight, and I'm probably going to have to get unemployment after this show from NBC. I may need to be on a payment plan for the fee.
You better have a good Thursday Night Football bet up your sleeve. We'll have our parlay cash again.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Josh Downs, he's got the Bills, but more importantly, Jay, he's still got Joe Flacco, who he has a 29% target share from throughout the season.
Yep. And so I think there is a compound effect of the Joe Flacco experience, which isn't talked about as much, which is that I think the run game for the Colts is just going to be worse with Flacco because you don't have to cover for Anthony Richardson. He's not taking another guy out of the box. We saw how Jonathan Taylor has struggled with Joe Flacco at quarterback in terms of efficiency. So I think that's just going to make them need to throw the ball more often. And Josh Downs, huge target rate with Flacco. I think he has surpassed Michael Pittman as just the best wide receiver on this team. And so, yeah, I think he's a viable wide receiver 2 type each week.
He's played 4 games with Joe Flacco. He's got at least 6 receptions in all of them. He lines up in the slot, and I bring that up, of course, because the Bills, they're allowed the 4th most receptions to the opposing slot. So in a game in which Indianapolis should be throwing often, Joe Flacco is going to be under pressure. Hopefully they can give him time. But even in a brutal game last week against Minnesota, where he was constantly under pressure, he was able only to complete 16 passes. Like over a third of them went to Josh Downs. So like he's the apple of Joe Flacco's eye.
Cade Otton makes the list, a top 5 tight end. Matthew, he's got 3 straight games with 10-plus targets and 8-plus receptions. The injuries to Godwin and Mike Evans have really had this pass offense funnel through Cade Otton.
20 points in both games that Evans and Godwin has missed. 3 straight games now with double-digit targets, 3 straight games with at least 8 receptions. Since week 7, Cade Otton is the number 1 tight end in fantasy football. Now, they go on a bye after this week, and then Mike Evans is expected back, so the window of elite Cade Otton-ness might be closing, but at least for this week against the 49ers, who since week 5 is allowing the 3rd most receptions per game to opposing tight ends, Cade Otton is a top 3 fantasy tight end for me this week.
Yep. I think when Evans comes back, he just falls back to being 7, tight end 8, like that type of range.
Still very viable.
Still being a top 8 tight end.
They're still not going to have Godwin.
No, he's done.
Some others, that's grim.
Sorry. Sorry, Chris.
He's alive.
I know you watched the show.
Others
He's
receiving
sitting
votes.
at home. He's sitting at home rehabbing. Let me just tune on Peacock. Let me see.
What
Let me
they're
see what's
airing
going on.
these
Yeah,
days?
let's see what
Australian
my guys
guy.
are going on.
Oh.
You know, Baker said that Australian bloke was very friendly. Posted a picture of just the two of them on social media. Let me see what's going on.
Oh, I'm done.
Yeah.
Done.
Oh,
Done.
wow. He
Unquote.
doesn't seem that friendly at all. Seems angry.
Here's
like a
some other
kangaroo.
pass catchers receiving votes. Tank Dell, who got some action, of course, against the Jets with both Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs out. Lad McConkey, the rookie, has really formed a connection with Justin Herbert. Xavier Legette going to get a ton of work now as Deontay Johnson is with the Ravens. Adam Thielen's still hurt with the Panthers.
And Jonathan Mingo traded for a fourth rounder.
Jonathan Mingo's gone. How could I forget?
Yeah.
Finally, the
You
door is
cannot
open
bring that
for
up
Xavier
enough.
Legette.
That Mingo was dealt for a fourth.
Rhamondre, a deeper cut here. And then Mike Gesicki on Thursday Night Football. We're going to talk plenty about him. And Jonnu Smith sneaks in as tight end 10, Matthew, against the Rams.
4 straight games with at least 6 targets for Jonnu Smith. Rams allow the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. We'll get to Gesicki in the next segment as well. But you know what? Very quietly over the past 2 games, since their bye, Odunze has a 23% target share. It feels very, very clearly that he's surpassed Keenan Allen on the passing chart for the Patriots, and my expectation here is Christian Gonzalez is going to be on DJ Moore. So Odunze should have some nice production from having his wide receiver 4. You mentioned Legette, very quietly touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 games for the Panther, 22% target share in the last 2 weeks in what should be a good matchup against the Giants. McConkey, since week 4, very quietly the 17th best wide receiver in fantasy football on a points per game basis. And Tank Dell, who plays for the Houston Texans. Jay, you and I, Lawrence Jackson, George Savaricas, will be in Houston at the Applebee's near the Galleria because that night, assuming I'm not fired, 50-50 at this point, I will be on the sideline at NRG Stadium to watch Tank Dell play this Detroit Lions defense. No team allows more receptions and yards per game to opposing wide receivers than the Detroit Lions. And in the 3 of the 4 games that Nico Collins has missed, Tank Dell has at least 13 fantasy points. I think he's a viable top 20 play this week.
We look at the hate list for pass catchers, headlined by DJ Moore. Jay, can you believe he only has 2 games this season with 60-plus receiving yards?
It just doesn't seem like Shane Waldron's a great offensive coordinator at this point. I'm sorry, we just don't have much evidence of that. It doesn't seem like they are clicking in the pass game, the strides that Caleb Williams made. Now, the book on this passing game was, all right, are they just lighting up the Panthers and the Jags because they're bad defenses, or is this just an awesome offense now? Well, it looked like they just lit up the 2 of the worst defenses in the NFL. And so DJ Moore is suffering as a result. Even though they are in throw scripts more often, they just haven't been able to manufacture space, touches. I don't think Caleb's playing terribly, but it seems like he's regressed a little bit from that hot stretch. And also, it's the same problem that we had going into the season. You have Odunze and Keenan Allen taking touches from you.
He had a 27-point game in Week 5, just that monster game in Week 5. Take that away, and on the season, DJ Moore is averaging 9.5 fantasy points per game. Single-digit fantasy points for DJ Moore. As I mentioned when I was talking up Odunze, we expect Christian Gonzalez to be on DJ Moore and shadow him for much of the game. The only wide receiver this entire year to score more than 15 fantasy points against Christian Gonzalez is DK Metcalf. And that was on a busted coverage. And so it just feels like it's going to be a long day at the office for DJ Moore. I'm outside my top 25 this week. And by the way, just want to point out that the Washington Commanders needed a secondary help. Christian Gonzalez was there for the taking, and instead Ron Rivera drafted Emmanuel Forbes.
Still a healthy scratch these days, Emmanuel Forbes?
I mean, we got Marshawn Lattimore, but we wouldn't have had to draft Marshawn. We wouldn't have to give up the picks for Marshawn Lattimore if Ron Rivera had just done what everyone else in football was screaming,
Literally.
Take Christian Gonzalez.
Okay.
It's not like this is not like hindsight. This is not 2020 hindsight, Jay Croucher. Everyone in the universe was like, Christian Gonzalez is ridiculous. He shouldn't have dropped this far. He's there for the taking. You guys have a desperate need at secondary. Draft Christian Gonzalez.
Okay.
And instead he drafted Emmanuel Forbes.
But if you had Christian Gonzalez instead of Emmanuel Forbes, you wouldn't have got the number 2 pick and you wouldn't have Jaden Daniels. So Ron Rivera was playing the long game, even though it got him fired.
Something to think about.
It worked out well for you in the end. It was a
did.
net positive.
Bottoming out was needed.
Yeah.
Bottoming out was 100% needed because, right, if he'd won 2 more games, maybe they keep Rivera. I don't know.
Ron Rivera was the tank commander you needed. Not
Worked
the one
out
you
in the
wanted.
end. You
but
should be
needed.
celebrating the terrible pick.
Yeah.
That's a
It
good
got you
point.
Jaden
I have to
Daniels.
think about that.
The Rivera statue
would
is
they have
in
won
play.
one more game? Would they have won at least one more game with
I think
Christian
so.
Gonzalez?
Yeah. Maybe not, but it would have been close.
I think they would have.
Yeah. He's good, Christian Gonzalez.
All right.
Anyway,
Marvin Harrison Jr.
yeah.
He's
Marvin
on the
Harrison
hate
Jr.
list.
He's
Speaking
playing
of
the Jets.
wide
He's playing the
rec-
Jets,
Yep.
and he can't. He's got one
can.
game since week 4 with over 50 receiving yards. Like,
Yeah.
just not on the same page with Kyler.
No, it's been bad. It's been
Yeah.
disappointing.
It's
not a talent issue.
No.
So
It's been upsetting.
wide receiver 25 for you in a week full of bye weeks.
No team allows fewer fantasy points to opposing wide receivers than your New York Football Jets. Wan'Dale Robinson very quietly has not become he used to be a PPR merchant, no longer. Back-to-back games now with below a 16% target share. He had only one game in weeks 1 through 7 where he went below that number as well. But feels like the emergence of Theo Johnson, Darius Slayton's had some nice games, Malik Neighbors, of course, coming back. In the 3 games since Neighbors returned from his concussion, Wan'Dale Robinson averaging under 7 fantasy points per game. And, and if he's not getting the volume, because he doesn't get a ton of yardage. So Wan'Dale Robinson needs a lot of volume to get there, and I just don't see him getting a lot of volume. He's outside my top 40, even though he's playing the Panthers.
Our last one here, Jay, Sam LaPorta. What a disappointing fantasy season it's been for him, despite the Lions being an absolute powerhouse. Houston has allowed the fewest fantasy points, receptions, and yards to tight ends this season.
Yeah, Sam LaPorta's too inconsistent. And you're probably still going to have to start Sam LaPorta if you drafted him as tight end 1, but I would just be hoping more than expecting great things at this point.
Yeah, Hunter Henry in week 6 had 41 yards against the Texans. That's literally the only tight end to have more than 35 yards against this Houston defense. And LaPorta, it's just been so inconsistent, and they get Jameson Williams back. There's just a lot of mouths to feed on that Lions offense that wants to run the ball.
We're taking our first break. When we're back, love-hate continues.
Just the first break? The show's still going on?
Oh, yeah. We're coming back
Lord.
with the quarterbacks right after
There's a chance
this.
we're canceled during the commercial break. What do you think you'll ask my parents, Lawrence, when you meet them?
I'm going to ask them what made them name you Matthew J. Berry. Then people don't know this. Your middle name is Jaquan.
Yes, this
People
is true.
don't know that.
Yeah,
So I want to
often
ask
forgotten.
your folks, like, what made y'all name this man Matthew Jaquan Berry? Hey, look, look. Now we gonna be in Houston now,
Yeah.
right? Home of Mike Jones. Who? Mike Jones, right? Look, so you might have to wear your gold teeth out there.
Okay.
Get ready. This Houston now. I'm
Yeah.
gonna wear mine, Houston.
All right.
Me and Jaquan gonna be grilled up
Yeah.
out there.
Always.
Jay has no
100%.
idea what he's walking into. No idea. An Australian in
No,
Houston.
Jay, for Jay, this is real America, baby.
Right, right,
Houston,
right.
Texas.
Fantasy football pregame is back on the road this weekend. The crew is headed to Houston for Lions at Texans, and you can be part of the action by dropping by the Applebee's Bar and Grill at 2959 North Loop West. Doors open at 9:30 a.m. Central Time. So come out, let us help you with your burning fantasy questions, and grab some food while you're at it with Jaquan.
Look at
I'm
that.
not kidding. We didn't do this. I just want to make this very clear.
Somebody out there did this on my Wikipedia, and you know, once it's on Wikipedia, it's true. The internet.
Not a lie I told on the internet.
Yeah.
Just lovely.
Jaquan. I think that's the right spelling of Jaquan.
Me and Lawrence actually debated this without you.
Yeah.
We debated between Q, UAN, and KWON.
Yeah. I
think we're
think
at the right
QUAN. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The KWON, though, was in consideration. Just
Fair
like
enough.
Like Quan Alexander.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
It's fair enough. But whoever edited my Wikipedia page,
Thank you.
there you go. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to go in and re-edit it. You know.
You're
so.
Matthew Jaquan Berry.
Exactly.
Love-hate
Fine.
continues. We got the quarterbacks
Done.
for you here, and we're starting with Thursday Night Football with Joe Burrow. Listen, guys, 53 is the over-under for this game. No surprise, Jay. That is the highest game total of the entire week.
I mean, the last time these two teams played, it was 79. So you got 26 points to play with. We have years and years of experience now that the Ravens secondary cannot handle Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Burrow had one of the best games of his entire career against the Ravens when they played last time until he threw that rough pick at the end. But yeah, I just think this is going to be an offensive explosion. I think Lamar is probably the favorite to be QB1 of the week, and Burrow might be QB2.
No team has a higher pass rate over expected than the Cincinnati Bengals. Teams that face the Ravens average the third most pass attempts. So just those two things, joining forces. And it's worth noting that quarterbacks throw at least 30 times against the Ravens this year, averaging 23.7 fantasy points per game. No team in the NFL is worse against the pass than the Baltimore Ravens. So yeah, wheels up for Joe Burrow. Proud fantasy life investor. He's my QB5 on the week. And we'll get to this on the Thursday night preview. I think the Bengals might win tonight.
Wow. 6-point
Yeah.
dogs.
Yeah.
Like it. Bold.
Definitely. I definitely like this, the Bengals +6. I'll say that. right now for sure.
QB5 for Burrow, right behind him, Brock Purdy, QB6. We've talked a lot about this Bucs defense, specifically on the back end, Matthew. They've allowed 24-plus fantasy points to a quarterback in the 4 of their past 5 games.
Yeah, and during that stretch that you just mentioned, the Buccaneers have also given up 17 touchdown passes. That's 3 more than any other team in the NFL. No team gives it up to opposing quarterbacks like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when it comes to touchdown passes. By the way, the Niners have the second highest implied team total this week. We think they get Chris McCaffrey back. Yeah, he's my QB6. Brock Purdy should have a big game against the Buccaneers off the bye.
Yep, we had a perfect passer rating when they played the Bucs last year. Also a massive rest advantage for the Niners, and this one coming off the bye while the Bucs have a short week and Baker Mayfield's not practicing.
Sam Darnold makes it into the top 10 quarterbacks, Jay. He's got Jacksonville. They're allowing a league-high 23.2 points per game to quarterbacks this season. We've talked about it. Feels like every quarterback has gone off against the Jacksonville defense.
Yep, they have very porous defense at the moment, particularly in the secondary. And I think the thing with Darnold is we kind of got like the full Darnold experience on Saturday Night Football, where I don't think he played particularly well against the Colts, but still able to put up massive numbers, able to get 3 touchdowns. Just this Kevin O'Connell offense, super friendly for quarterbacks, and Darnold taking
This has been such a high floor with Sam Darnold, and you can't ask for a better matchup than these Jacksonville Jaguars. Since week 3, they're the only team worse than them in pass defense is the Ravens. They're 31st against the pass. So I have Darnold as a top 8 play this week.
Some others receiving votes. Aaron Rodgers, he's got Arizona. A great matchup for him. Tua, who's back, and that makes everyone on the Dolphins offense happy. He's got the Rams. So these guys go QB11 and QB12. Not far behind them, Matthew, is Daniel Jones at QB14 against the Panthers.
Yeah, Panthers allowed touchdown passes at the second highest rate this season since week 5. They're giving up over 20 points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Daniel Jones has very quietly been, solid in fantasy. He was a top 5 fantasy quarterback last week. Daniel Jones was. So I like him as a streamer this week in the game in Germany. They're at Carolina, but this is the Germany game. It'll be Sunday morning very early. You mentioned Tua against the Rams. LA's allowed multiple touchdown passes in 3 of the past 4. He's completing 80% of his passes since he returned. I'm a QB12. And just ahead of him, Aaron Rodgers. We've talked a lot about Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams against the Cardinals. Well, it makes sense that we also like the quarterback throwing in the passes. 3 of the past 4 games, at least 17 fantasy points for A-Rod. Since they've traded for Devontae Adams, the Jets are actually top 6 in the NFL in pass rate inside the 10-yard line. They get in close, and as somebody that has Breece Hall on a decent amount of teams, I'm aware. But when they get in close, feels like Rodgers wants to pad the stats and try to get his guys.
Yes,
he wants 5 or 17 to get the ball.
That's President Rodgers to you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Future President Rodgers.
We move to the hate
I think
list.
he's probably future Secretary of Health.
Oh, yeah.
and then he'll move on to vice president or president.
Yeah. That's the order of operations. Yeah. The hate list, listen, Titans-Chargers is the lowest total of the week. It's at 38.5. So Justin Herbert makes the hate list, Jay. He's got the Titans pass defense, which is number 1 in the NFL.
Chargers don't play games where there's 40 points. Like, they just don't do it.
They don't want it.
They don't want to do it. Their defense has been surprisingly good, and then the offense, until recently, had been very run-heavy. They are throwing the ball more, but look, this Titans defense, they didn't sell off as many parts perhaps as people thought, so you still have Legette, Snead, you still have Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons on the interior, so it's not a pushover. The Titans offense have been much more, their issues have been much more on offense.
Yeah, I mean, they have the number 1 ranked pass defense this year. Now, part of it is because teams haven't had to score that much, teams haven't had to throw that much against them, but still, no team allows less passing yards per game than the Tennessee Titans. You mentioned the over-under, 38.5. It's the lowest total on the slate as well. By the way, the other thing is that Tennessee's given up 6 yards per pass attempt. That's lowest in the NFL as well. So when they are giving up yards, it's like these dink and dunk stuff. And so Justin Herbert, who's playing behind a good, I know we've saw some signs of life and nice game last week as well, but outside my top 15 for the week against Tennessee, I think this is a kind of an ugly slugfest type game.
Russell Wilson outside the top 20. He's QB21 for you, Matthew. He's got your Commanders, who, this will surprise some people. Since week 4, they're allowing the second fewest points per game to quarterbacks. They've really turned this around.
And they just added Marshawn Lattimore. What? How's that possible? Oh, my God. 5 of the last 6 quarterbacks to face my Commanders have thrown for under 175 yards. Thank you very much. Since week 4, as you mentioned, they allow the second fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. And Russell Wilson, in both of his starts this year, has been under 30 passing attempts. By the way, teams that face the Commanders also average the fewest pass attempts. Now, you think about how this game sort of plays out. Pittsburgh wants to run the ball, wants to slow it down. And because the Commanders are so good on the ground, not just with Jaden Daniels, but also with Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. Like they tend to grind out drives a lot as well. They'll have some explosive big plays, some shots down the field to Terry McLaurin to keep defenses honest, but it just doesn't feel like there's going to be a ton of possessions on both sides of the ball in this one.
Our final quarterback here, Bo Nix. He's only got 12.5 points per game in the 4 games he hasn't scored a rushing or receiving touchdown.
Yeah, indeed. And now I feel like Nix v. Spags is a mismatch. Nix has really struggled against the blitz, against pressure. Now he gets an awesome defense. I think this is going to be a bit of a slugfest this game. So Bo Nix, even though he's trending in the right direction and the rushing still provides a certain floor, very tough matchup for Nix.
Well, and by the way, to your point, when blitz this season, Bo Nix is a bottom 12 quarterback in terms of passer rating as well. Chiefs top 5 in the NFL in blitz rate. You've got a rookie quarterback going into Arrowhead to face Steve Spagnuolo's defense. Like, no thank you. I know Nix has been good so far, but also barely inside my top 20. I'm at QB 19 this week.
We're taking our last break. When we're back, last call. We got our best bets and preview for Thursday Night Football. Bengals-Ravens right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours! Let's take a look at the most bet props for Thursday Night Football.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please use promo code Barry, Berry. Please, I'm asking you. If you like this show, if you want to support your boy,
it's a good time.
Berry, promo code Barry. This is a good time to do it.
Yeah, bonus bets. You'll want them. Zay Flowers receiving yards 50 plus, -200. Zay Flowers receiving yards 60 plus, -120. And then 3 Derrick Henry rush line 60 plus, 70 plus, 80 plus, ranging from -400 to -155. Jay, what do you like tonight?
So it's a little scary to take an under on Derrick Henry, but I'm not taking the under on the yards, taking the under on the attempts, under 18.5. I think at some point there has to be an element of preservation with Derrick Henry, who had 23 carries on the weekend against the Broncos. Now it's a short week going against the Bengals. Couple things here. One, he actually struggled against the Bengals when they played the first time until he broke off that 51-yarder in overtime. He didn't really get much going. He only had 15 carries for the game, including overtime. And the other thing is that, one, I think the Ravens are going to have explosive success through the air, and they're not going to need Henry as much. And then 2, I do think that Burrow and the Bengals are going to be able to move the ball, stay on the field, and not allow the Ravens just to have 40 minutes time of possession. So give me the under on 18.5 rushing attempts.
Especially on the short week, maybe you see more Justice Hill today than normally as well. I like that bet as well. I'm going to stay on the Ravens as well. I'm taking Lamar Jackson over 233.5 passing yards. First off, he's had 5 straight games with at least 280 passing yards. And against the Bengals, he has to get to 234. The first time he played the Bengals, 348 passing yards. So we have over 100 yards to play with. By the way, the Bengals have allowed at least 235 passing yards in 2 of the last 3 as well. We've talked about the over-under in this game. So we think that, to your point, Burrow and the Bengals will have to be able to move the ball. And so Lamar is going to be throwing quite a bit. Yeah, give me the over on 233.5 passing yards for Lamar Jackson.
Like that.
First bold bet of the year for me, guys. I'm going Mike Gesicki, anytime touchdown, plus 230. Ooh. Yes, he got his first 2 last week, but Gesicki, more importantly, he's got 14 targets over the last 2 games. No T. Higgins tonight. Gesicki will be their number 2. Yep. I think he gets in the end zone.
Oh, I like that as well. And I'll also say this isn't one of my bets, but give me the Bengals plus 6.
Yeah.
I actually think there's a decent chance they win tonight, but I definitely think they cover.
Let's take a look at the top-ranked players
desperate.
in this game.
This is a much more important game to the Bengals than it is the Ravens.
Bengals win this game, they're 1 game behind the Ravens, and they'll have the lead on the tiebreak, which seems crazy given where they started.
The Bengals, I mean. If the Bengals win this game, right.
Yeah, they'll be 1 game behind both.
A lot of fantasy-relevant players in this one, Matthew, to kick off the week.
Yeah, obviously you're starting the quarterbacks. I think you're starting the running backs as well. You see Chase Brown there at running back 16. Obviously tough matchup against the Ravens. So good against the run, but he's involved in the passing game. And you don't really think you'll see Khalil Herbert a lot tonight. He just got there on a short week. Zach Moss is already out as well. You mentioned T. Higgins. We're not expecting him to play, so Gesicki suddenly on the tight end sleeper radar as well.
Yeah, I would avoid Deontay Johnson tonight if you can. His receiving prop only set at 18.5 yards. He didn't get much work at all on Sunday, and suspect that he's probably still not going to be fully
Isaiah
integrated.
likely banged up, so maybe more Mark Andrews. So I think Mark Andrews becomes usable tonight as well. That music means it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't. You can't stay here. You know what you should do? Get on a plane and fly yourself to Houston Texans. Houston, Texas. It was a long night for me. Fly to Houston, Texas, and come see us on Sunday morning at Applebee's near the Galleria for Fantasy Football Pregame. For Jay and Connor, I'm Matthew. Go read, love, hate. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.